Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Lot. I'm Ken Kapatoff.
And I'm Anthony Epp. We are here to take a deep dive into the world of independent filmmaking and really get into the nuts and bolts of how to make your movies on your own terms.
With the Hollywood landscape changing so quickly, now is the time to become your own gatekeeper, and with this podcast, we'll explore exactly what that looks like. So be sure to like, follow, or subscribe, and if you like something you hear, share it with your friends. It really helps us out. Let's dive in. Anthony, it's good to see you. Besides the vertical productions that you've been on, this has been another, busy few weeks for you as you're prepping another exciting shoot. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've been inspired kind of by the podcast guests actually to sort of we're planning to film Quiet Canadians in October, November, which of course is like feels like months down the road. But inspired by some of the conversations we've been having, we were thinking, okay, well, let's get started now. So we basically decided that we were going to take a part of our movie script, which is the Quiet Canadians, so it's a spy film, and try to shoot a small portion of it this summer. The one we're going to do is sort of a second unit part, which is basically one of the stunt sequences, and that's going to be a wingsuit jump.
Great, cool.
And we are now in talks with a stunt coordinator and some wingsuit experts about planning this wingsuit jump, which is it's in the movie. Like we have a scene in the movie where there is a wingsuit jump. I won't give away where
Yeah.
and how it fits into the story, but we do have that. And so we've decided that as part of this whole thing of trying to elevate the idea of Canadian independent film, we're going to take a page out of Hollywood blockbusters and put a whole marketing campaign around this idea of shooting this stunt sequence before we even
Wow.
start main production. Yeah, so we're putting that in motion, and we just had a conversation today with a couple of our producers, and we're making some plans for how to kind of turn this into kind of like what Mission Impossible does with its Tom Cruise stunts. You know, like you always see that iconic stunt that is going to be in the movie ahead of time, and then they start teasing out the behind the scenes of how it all came together. This is that, but for our film, and it's kind of inspired by The Spy Who Loved Me, which is the James Bond film where when James Bond skis off the cliff, and then the Union Jack opens,
Yeah.
and that leads into the opening credits of the film.
Yeah.
And that was something that was just so phenomenally well done, and it was such a huge stunt sequence to do practically. So we're seeing what the logistics are of shooting something like this practically.
That's
and doing
amazing.
it on an indie budget.
Indie budget, practical wingsuit sequence. Just immediately the stakes are heightened. The visuals are going to be phenomenal, right? Those things are unbelievable. Every wingsuit video is like super, super cool to see. That's really interesting. So what are the types of things that go into prepping something like that?
Right. So first of all, the first question we have to find out is where can we legally do it? And we want to do it in Canada. So is there a place where we can legally do something like this and get insurance and get the right, the right permits to do this properly? Because we could theoretically just find someone who's just wingsuit professional who just goes and does it. But we think we know that it can be done properly and safely, or at least we know that it can be done according, because we see it in Red Bull commercials all the time, or on the Red
absolutely.
Bull stuff on Instagram and on YouTube. So we're like, okay, well, we know it's possible. We know that they do it, and they must have some kind of insurance and stuff that gets it done. So that's the first thing, is finding a location where it can be done legally and where we can get permits and the right insurance to do it. Second thing is to have our stunt coordinator put together a plan of action for us. It basically says, like, how are we going to conduct it in consultation with wingsuit divers? Like, what are the factors we have to play? Because a lot of this comes down to what are the conditions like what makes this a go, no go? Because what we would like to do is be able to predict, at least to a certain extent, give ourselves what we would call the optimal chance of being able to do it all once and on one day, and not have to get everybody ready, get everybody set to go, and then realize that the conditions just aren't good, and so we have to wait another day.
How many times do you think you're going to have to do the stunt to capture it for the movie?
We hope just once. Like that's
really?
I
Okay.
mean, we really hope to do it all in one, at least the main one. We've got a couple of supplementary little ones, like where we might have a close up of the character jumping off something onto like a mat or something like that. Like there might be
For
some
sure,
smaller
yeah.
stunt parts that we would do over and over again. But the main jump itself, we're hoping to basically just do once and then capture it from as many possible angles as we can, as we can afford. get some main ones, get the right technology in terms of the GoPro cameras and things like that to make sure that
Hmm.
their specs are right. Because obviously we could use the action cams that they use on those things, and maybe those are sufficient, but we want to make sure that we're doing a little bit of camera testing with them to see how they might match with the camera that we intend to shoot the movie on.
Yeah.
See how we can get them to match. So we might have to do some of that. So there might be some testing ahead of time, and that'll come into consultation with our director of photography. So all those little technical things, because as you know, or as we always hear this about, is like the color science in different cameras can impact a lot of things. And
Yeah.
you don't want to look, sometimes there's an okay thing where you can have, different types of cameras on a set and it's not noticeable, but you want to reduce the chances of taking the audience out by making them feel like one part of the movie was done with a documentary camera and the other part of the movie was done with a higher end camera or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And you have to admit, it's almost like if you either have to shoot with all crappy cameras or high end,
Just for that
the good ones,
consistency. Yeah, totally. Because
for
yeah,
that
switching
consistency.
from a GoPro to an Alexa, there's a noticeable difference.
Yeah.
But you want that shot
Or
of the
is there?
GoPro. I mean,
Yeah.
to some extent, there is a video feel to. I think they're getting better, and there's a lot that you can do with plugins and color correction, and adding a sort of that film filter and stuff like that. So there's a lot of work you can do now versus what you couldn't even do 10 years ago.
So a lot of that'll come down to doing those kind of tests to see, because we do want to mount cameras to the diver. That's we know that we're not going to mount an Amira or an Arri Alexa to the diver. So it
Mhm.
has to be something that would be functionally useful.
We did something
Yeah.
similar on Travelers, actually. In episode
Right.
207, we had a skydiving sequence, and it was directed by Amanda Tapping, who we both know and love. We did I wasn't in the plane, but the skydivers jumped, I think it was 4 or 5 times. They had worked out the whole sequence because there's a whole story that's happening in the dive itself where two divers have to collide and one's unconscious and one has to come in and save them, all while they're free falling. It's pretty crazy. But they worked out the story on the ground, and then they went up into the plane. They did it, and it was awesome. So they did it, a few more times just for more angles. And there was obviously like the diver that had the camera mounted on his head, the cam up, and yeah, it was pretty wild. But for that, we used GoPros, and it still looked great. Like it was Netflix standard. You can watch the episode right now. It's season 2, episode 7.
I might just do that. I might contact Amanda too and see what her
Yeah.
advice would be.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
That's the next thing. That's March, April, May, and June right now.
That's a really cool sequence to be working on right now, and like you said, it's a great way to market the movie and get the word of mouth out there of like, hey, look, this isn't just some like indie Canadian drama of somebody being sad.
We have a wingsuit, and really that is that idea of reverse engineering the audience. So like, let's build the audience for this film so that we're not opening into a vacuum. We want
Yeah.
to have an opportunity to really, when the movie's finished, we want it to already have a feeling to it that people want to go see what we were able to put together.
So continuing down the road of talking to department heads, we're very excited about today's guest. Dean Goodine is a legendary prop master with almost 40 years under his belt in film and television. His resume is truly incredible, having worked with Clint Eastwood on Unforgiven, Kevin Costner on Open Range, Christopher Nolan on Inception, and Andrew Dominic and Roger Deakins on the absolutely beautiful movie The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Dean's most recent credits include 2 amazing 2024 indie films, Heretic by Beck Woods and The Order by Justin Kurzel, starring Jude Law.
And as if that wasn't enough, his TV credits include Stargate SG-1, See on Apple, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, and he's currently on Percy Jackson and the Olympians for Disney+. In this discussion, we dive right into the world of the props department and break down what it takes to work with production designers, actors, and directors across all genres, mediums, and budget levels. You do not want to miss this one. And here's our chat with Dean Goodine.
All right, so Dean Goodine, welcome, legendary prop master, with us today. It's an honor to have you, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful to meet you, Dean.
Thank you, Anthony. It's nice to meet you. And Ken and I have some history, which is great. And whenever somebody calls me legendary, I always say, you mean old, right? But I have been around for 39 years now in the entertainment industry. So I feel very fortunate to have made it this far in a gig economy.
Well, 39 years is an amazing run, and you've worked on some just downright classics and some just amazing films, and like Unforgiven, The Assassination of Jesse James, The Edge, Inception, Man of Steel. You've worked on everything, and also on the TV side, from Stargate to Lemony Snicket to See on Apple, and right now Percy Jackson and the Olympians. You've also worked on two great indie films from 2024, Heretic and The Order. So we're just excited to talk about all of that. On top of that, you're an author who has written a must-read book as far as we're concerned. It's called They Don't Pay Me to Say No: Your Life in the Props Department Over 39 Years. And this really is a must read. It's like being a fly on the wall for Dean's entire film experience and working on these huge, big budget movies, indie movies, commercials, CBC, TV series, everything. Yeah, and it's just so educational. So, Dean, thanks for even creating that resource for everybody.
I feel very fortunate that I've gotten to this point of my career. I think the main thing that comes from it is just a love of craft and a love of filmmaking and television, just telling stories. And I know how lucky I've been, and I really enjoy sharing it. The reason for the book was just, even though it's a book about a prop master or a prop person on set, it's about filmmaking. It's about what young filmmakers, all filmmakers can take something from it. And what I write about what was successful. And I do it with a lot of humor. I used the late Stuart McLean as a bit of a foundation for storytelling, because you want to entertain people. I didn't want it to be a dry book. So I feel very fortunate. And the book has traveled around. It's available in libraries in a lot of Western cities. And I feel very fortunate that it's found an audience.
So let's talk about it a bit. Like many people, I think, don't really understand the role of a props master. Can you tell us, sort of in your words, what is a prop master and how does their work affect the movie?
Well, the prop master puts the action into an actor's hands. And we also help the actor become the character they're portraying on the screen, no matter what that character is. So, in some ways, we become little mini experts in prep about what that character is, whether they're a World War One soldier or a Japanese samurai or an FBI agent or a world class photographer. Whatever that character is portraying in that movie, they look to us to give them the research, and we spend time with them. We bring in the experts to work with them. If they're a surgeon, I bring in a surgeon. If they're an FBI agent, I bring in the appropriate police trainers to train them, and I hook them up with FBI agents in the United States to talk to about different situations. So the simplest way to say it is that whatever an actor lifts, moves, carries in a scene, whatever he or she pick up on a set to interact with, that is a prop. And so we deal with the motion. Like I said, the action of the scene is usually travels through the hands of an actor.
And so let's dive into your backstory a little bit more. How did you even get into film? Did you always want to do this? Did you always want to do props or work in the art department in some way? How did that happen?
Well, the art, I was accidentally ended up in the art department. Backstory was in all the way back as far as I can remember, growing up in New Brunswick, I wanted to work in entertainment, whether it was going to be in radio or music in some way. I love music, so I thought I would end up recording studio or writing for. I always wanted to write for Rolling Stone, in all honesty, and so when I moved to Alberta from New Brunswick, I ended up in the oil fields for about 6 years. And I was at a real turning point where I'd been offered some really incredible jobs offshore and different things. But because I had this dream, I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. And I need one shot. So I applied to the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology in Calgary and took their cinema stage and radio and film program. And in between first and second year, some of my classmates stopped and said, we need a set dresser tomorrow on a show. We're doing a little CTV series. So I went out for the day and fell in love with the industry. And the interesting aspect of that whole story is when I knocked on the door of the address I was supposed to report to, the woman that answered the door is my wife, Janice. She was the very first person I met, my very first paying gig. And I asked her, I said, was it love at first sight? And she said, no. And I went, yeah, okay. But here, we're still together 39 years later.
That's amazing. What a story. I love that.
Film relationships always work out.
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
But at least like Janice is an Oscar-nominated set decorator now, and that was for Unforgiven, correct?
That
Yeah,
is correct.
yeah, and you're in props, and so those two departments go hand in hand. So, did you end up working together a bunch over the years?
Yeah, we worked together on a lot of shows. Unforgiven, The Assassination of Jesse James, Passchendaele, The Edge. Yeah, but we had rules. I think to maintain a relationship in film, you have to not forget who you are before you get into film because it is an all-encompassing industry. We have passion for our crafts. We love it. But we also know that we have to find a balance, work-life balance. And so I set up a rule that we had to call it the 15-minute rule. When you put the key in the door at the end of the day to go in your house, you have 15 minutes to talk about it, and then we have to become just normal human beings dealing with life like everybody else. And then on Sundays was a no film zone unless the set was on fire, which actually did happen one Sunday. The phone rang and they burnt down Jan's set. But other than that, we've done pretty good at maintaining a no film 24/7 lifestyle. We started together on that very first show, Hamilton's Quest, and then it felt like almost every show in Calgary because she was the only set decorator and I was the only prop person really. So we went virtually to every show, but the major shows were Unforgiven when she was the set decorator and I was an assistant prop master. And then we went on to she did some buying on Legends of the Fall and I was there as an assistant prop master. Then The Edge we did together, then Jesse James and Passchendaele. And King and Maxwell here in Vancouver was really the last show we worked on together because shortly after that she retired.
Yeah, and that's and we worked together on that one as well. So it was great
Yeah,
that I got a chance to work with Jan too, who's just incredibly talented and lovely, and for those that can see, an incredible painter as well behind you there, Dean. Yeah.
How do prop masters and set designers work together? Because there seems to be quite a lot of cross pollination in those departments.
the interesting thing is we always talk to each other. And it's not just because it's Jan and I. I'm currently working with a wonderful decorator on Percy Jackson, and he said to me just the other day that we had nothing fall between the cracks between us in 2 years, which is an amazing commentary because we don't put up, some departments will put up a wall. That's your job. That's my job. We talk about every aspect because there's a lot of, like you said, Anthony, there's a lot of cross pollination of objects on a set that all of a sudden an actor will pick it up and it becomes a prop, even though it wasn't planned. So we talk through everything and we make sure that if it's a restaurant scene, do you want to do the dishes or am I doing the dishes? Am I bringing in the glassware or are you bringing the glassware? Our job is just always make sure that we are giving the director and the production designer what they want. And we're just working with each other to make sure that we are not missing anything. In my mind, I think like a set decorator because in indie world, when I'm not prop mastering back in the 80s and early 90s, and I was doing smaller shows between the big shows, I was basically everything. I production designed, I built the set, I painted the set, I dressed the set, and then I was the prop master. So I think that when you come out of an indie background like that, you become much better at your craft. When you suddenly have a singular focus, it's almost free. You go, I only have to think about the props, but you still think about everybody else.
Well, as a first assistant director, that's oftentimes one of the biggest questions in the concept or in the production meeting is whose job is this? And directors asking for a particular thing, and I'll look at props and set deck and go, all right, so which one of you has this one? And it's not always a clear cut answer, right? Like you said, like sometimes it starts off as set deck and becomes a prop, and sometimes it's one of the cell phones on the desk is a prop, and seven of the other ones are going to be set deck.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that, if you're in an office set, for instance, if it's a laptop, it's a prop. If it's a desktop, it's a set deck thing. If it's a screen on a wall, it's set deck. But sometimes it can be a prop depending on the specialization of the screen. We
Yeah, the
talk about
remote
everything.
control is the prop.
Yeah, and it goes through with costumes as well because
Right.
if you a lot of times we accessorize the costumes, police officer, the badges, the name tags, the duty belts, the ballistic vests, all that stuff are props, even though they go on top of the costume. If it's World War One, it's all the web gear and all the belt tools and everything to go with that. So we're always working with costumes as well. Eyeglasses are a prop, rings are a prop, wedding rings are a prop, watches are a prop, but bracelets, necklaces, anything that's not script specific, that it has an insert or something, is usually costumes. It's just one of those gray zones. Some costume designers go, purses are props, and I always go, never bought a purse in 39 years. Do you really want me? Do I look like the guy in my red plaid lumber shirt and ball cap that you want out trying to find a Fendi bag for your actor? So it's always that.
Yeah. And so even with the giant productions versus the small productions, this is a conversation that happens all the time. So let's dive into the process of it all as well, because I think this is really interesting. So like you get hired onto, let's say a Hollywood film of some kind. What's the first thing that you do? You are the prop master of this movie, and take us through the pre-production process for you, and how do you break down a script?
Well, the first thing that happens is I just read the script for story. I don't pull out a notebook. I don't open up my word processor or any of that. I just read the script for story. And what I like to do is I like to read it and just you let your imagination tell you where you're going, because your imagination sometimes is your best guide. Before you get any information from everybody else, you just read it and you go, what era am I in? What are we doing? Then the next process is I then break down the script. And the breakdown is not sort of heavily layered in the beginning. It's usually just what cast are in the scene, what the listed props are, and then I put a little category of what the action is around that prop. But what I see a mistake a lot of young prop masters make is that they don't actually they look at the listed prop, but they don't think about the room. I always think about the room. What you always have to anticipate the ask. That's what I call anticipate the ask. So I'm in this room. The prop is a book. Okay. What else could they possibly ask for in that room? And what I do is I don't go out and get a whole bunch of extra stuff. It's just these will allow me to ask questions in my first meeting with the production designer. So once I get my breakdown done, then I will do a list of questions, and I will sit down with, if I'm lucky, I'll sit down with the director, but usually I'll go to the production designer first because I want to make sure that I have their vision, because they've already talked to the director about the vision. I want to make sure that I'm on the same page. And then I will put together photo board, bring in samples, and then I will arrange for a meeting with the director, and I'll sit down with the director. And I don't drive the director with every single prop in the script, because there are certain things that are logical. You don't ask them uh, every question because you'd be there for days. I just basically hit all the big stuff. And on a bigger production, manufacturing is always the thing that takes the most time. It costs the most. So that's the first thing I want to jump on, because you need to have the time to build, and you don't want to have to pivot halfway through that build, because then your budget starts spiraling. So it's basically read the script for story, do a breakdown, do a list of questions for the production designer to make sure you're on the same page, and then arrange for a meeting with the director and gather some research materials for that meeting to have that initial meeting with the director. Then once I finish that, I will then go back. Once I have that information, I'll drill in a little bit tighter on all the items that we talked about.
What are some interesting builds or difficult builds that you had in your past?
Well, just in the last couple of years, building fight safe weapons are always the toughest thing if you're dealing with swords and archery and any type of impact weapon between two people fighting. If you have a metal sword blade, you actually can't fight with metal sword blades in a show safely. So we create the swords, and then we turn around and we make bamboo swords, and a lot of the different prop builds, everyone presents its own challenge. For me to sort of say, oh, that one was really tough, or that one was really tough, but everything goes through the stunt department. If it's in my world, if it's a fight prop. So I sit down with the stunt coordinator, and we look at materials, and we test things, and I always say it's better to break it in the training gym than it is on the set. And I don't want to hurt anybody either. So we really work our way through all of that. So I don't know, for me to say a specific prop, I would say before post-production muzzle flash was being used, back, I'm that old, that we had to do a big shootout on open range, Kevin Costner's Western, and I had to develop some electric revolvers for a very close shooting. And there's always anxiety around firearms, and anxiety as in I have to be super safe to make sure that everybody else feels comfortable with what we're doing, because Canada is not a gun culture. So it's really, really important for me to maintain an air of calm and solve every conceivable problem long before it gets to the set.
I have noticed that about especially when it comes to weapons and guns is the feeling around them really comes down to how the props master and the armor, if you have both departments separated, but how those departments run their department and how they run the set. It really speaks to how everybody else feels around it, because if you feel like it isn't organized well, that everybody gets a little edgier and they don't perform it the same way, and everybody's a little bit more on guard. Whereas when I've seen those calm and very structured and organized safety meetings and so on, it just seems like everybody's like, okay, good, we're safe, we're fine, let's just go and have fun and play.
Well, I have a whole term about filmmaking in general, is that your prep is your show. And so the set is not the place to spring surprises or have that anxiety of the unknown thing. So in prep, I lay out how I'm going to do. Let's just talk firearms for a second. Everybody knows in prep how we're going to handle firearms on set, and it's not going to change when we get to the set. I don't care if the sun's going down or an actor only has 5 more minutes before you have to get them into the trailers and get them into the car to make your turnaround the next day, because you can only do firearms one way, and that is methodical, thoughtful, and safe. And so, as you said, Anthony, if you get around people who have any type of anxiety and they're the people that are handling the weapon, then that creates an unease around everybody on set. And so my armor's very quiet. Nobody else. We don't yell anything out. It's a very quiet, very structured set. And I think that's the thing that goes back to prep. As long as you sit down and prep and you talk through everything you're going to do in your action sequences, and you have a plan and you have a strong stunt coordinator there as well, they're very important to the whole process. If your stunt coordinator, your armor, and your prop master or your on-set prop person are very calm and very focused, it keeps the set safe. It keeps everybody going in the right direction. And you know what? You can go really fast and be safe and quiet.
That's so true. They always say I always equate it to, you watch an ambulance come up to a scene, and the one group that's never panicking are the ambulance, the EMTs. They're the ones that look the most calm, and they're the ones that have to deal with probably the hardest part.
Yeah, and it's such a tricky position to be in, especially when you're dealing with firearms and safety issues like this. Are there any other common mistakes that you see filmmakers making in the props department, say as they're coming up, or some, on an indie set, things that maybe could be overlooked in that regard?
It depends on, it's hiring. It's all about hiring. I think that a successful film is done when you hire your crew. And I know that indies have financial barriers at times for hiring people, but there are a couple line items that you should never scrimp on. And one is, if you have firearms and you do have to fire blanks, then you have to spend that money. You can't just hire somebody who has 2 credits and suddenly they're going to be in charge of this. You need people who have the chops. Even if you budget in that they're only available for 2 days or whatever, you just put the right people there for that one sequence. It's like no different than bringing in the techno crane crew for the day or anything. If you have a specialized sequence like that, get the right people for. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking because we have to get a firearms license and we take the 2 day course that suddenly we're armors on set. That's not the case at all. That's not, as a matter of fact, 39 years, I've done my own armoring on shows, but you know what? I don't when I don't have to, because I want somebody whose focus is only the firearm. And I think that, from an independent filmmaking standpoint, again, it's an expensive proposition. I would say post-production muzzle flash, depending on what you're doing budget wise, is always a great solution to that. It's, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I feel like you have to hire the right people. That's a mistake. The mistake is always made in prep.
It's putting your resources and your money behind the right things, not the wrong things. And if you can't afford to do it safely, you just can't do it.
Exactly. And I think that's the important thing, is that, if your show has a bank robbery, then it's it's pivotal to the story. Then you have to figure out how to do it safely and give the creator, the vision that you saw for that scene. And so you just have to look at, maybe I take one crane day out to give us, that extra armor or something for that one day.
Yeah. And so taking a step back too, like what's it like working on within certain genres of film and television? Because you have done the Western, you've done sci-fi, TV shows, you've done fantasy, you've done all of these things. Does your approach change at all when you are tackling these things? Do you have to do a bunch of research as well to dive into that and learn more about if it's very specific about the culture, that type of thing?
Yeah, every genre has its own thing. The Western is really about history and knowing the period and making sure that your props are of the right period. If it's 1870 or 1880, or when you move into sci-fi, that's a heavy manufacturing fantasy world. So tend to employ concept artists a lot for props. So what'll happen is I really work with the designer more more in science fiction than probably any genre, because we have to sit down and come up with a concept for any futuristic weaponry or any items that are from that world, hand props, anything that is from the world you're depicting. So what'll happen there is I'll hire a concept artist, and I'll have that concept artist give me 3 or 4 choices based on a discussion I've had with the designer or the director of what they're looking for in an item, and then I have to turn around and figure out how to manufacture it. So one of the very first things I do in sci-fi is concept art. It's the very first thing you do because it takes so long to build something from scratch. So you really have to have the idea of what you're doing there. If I do just a straight ahead cop drama, then it's really about making sure I have all the right badges and all the various right police things for the city that we're portraying in the show. And if they're like I said, if they're SWAT, then the tactical gear, all that kind of stuff. So it's all sort of, there's different preps. And with a heavy firearm show, there's a lot of studio work as far as writing out what the firearms are being used for, how they're being used, how they're being stored, and all of that as well.
The other thing to consider too when you're working in props or set deck for on a television series is like a studio feature, you're dealing with clearances and lawyers at say CBS Studios who will have a problem with a small design of the FBI logo that you're using or whatever, and these things all impact the manufacturing of the actual props and pieces of set deck that you need for this episode. And TV's on such a tight schedule. I just remember when we were working on King and Maxwell, we were just always under the gun to get things done and made and ready for set. So you're dealing with a creative problem and a logistical problem of actually having things ready for the actors and for the director on the set.
Yeah, it's very true. The clearance side of the industry can be onerous at times, and it can really stop you. But you really have to make sure that before you turn the machines on or graphics or whatever, that you put it through the filter. And if you're lucky, you'll have scripts or treatments. If you're in episodic television, you'll have scripts and treatments a few episodes ahead, so that you can get ahead of it. If you're doing a procedural, it's really in prep that you're solving all that, because your police officers or whatever carry on through the whole season. So you're really getting all that laid out in the prep. Where it gets tricky is if there's a last minute request of a newspaper or a magazine or a postcard or a photograph. That just creates a whole frenzy of trying to get stuff through. Usually we license various Getty images or whatever. So, you kind of go into those images, see what you can pull off because you have the license to use it. And then we have in-house graphics people that are always working. They're always working on stuff.
I remember when I worked in clearances, we would pre-clear a whole bunch of like random magazine names and names of people, like just sort of just pre-clear people that could be written on a document or something like that in case we needed to throw one up really quickly. We'd have like a Jane Doe basically ready to go in case you needed a name, or a when it would be a police thing, you'd have the board with all the most wanteds and be on the lookout for and so on, and they would just have a bunch of names of people that we had pre-cleared before the season even started.
Yeah, the poor crew on the most wanted boards in most police
Yes.
offices. You kind of wonder if you ended up traveling to the States and all of a sudden some super fan of the show gets you
Yeah.
arrested because they saw you on CSI, whatever. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you'll see me. I'm both a missing person and a most wanted in Motive. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Oh, that's great. What a
depending on the
great thing.
episode. Yeah,
And, nobody's caught you yet, so it's all good. But now with this
exactly.
podcast,
And they haven't found me.
thing is, now with this podcast, once it really blows up, you better maybe have to wear a fake mustache and some glasses just to make sure.
So like obviously we're talking a little bit about television, but this, you never have enough budget to do anything that you want to do. But sometimes when we get into these low budget, low budget, really low budget independent productions where you might have that gun day where you're going to spend the money on the gun day, but what can you do to mitigate costs in sort of your department that helps an independent filmmaker so that they can get the quality and the look that they're looking for, but do it kind of on that hacking, do it yourself sort of.
When I listened to your episode, The Stickman, about the young guys who did the Stickman movie, it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff I did early in my career. So to go to that is that you put the money, like you said, where it needs to be spent. But we're very creative craftspeople, and I think that you have to sit down with the director and the producer, or if it's a director, writer, producer, depending on the size of the show, and you have to really highlight what's important. Budgeting indie films, it must be. I think it must be difficult. I never budgeted one, but I look at it this way: there are fixed costs. If you are getting a camera package and lenses, you're picking it up this day and you're returning this day. You know that cost because you've had that camera for a week or 3 days or 2 weeks. Your grip package, your lighting package, everything in film for the most part are fixed costs, office costs. Anything you do is a fixed cost except for the art department. And then when you get to props, we are the last minute solution to every suggestion on a set, which means budgeting props sometimes like trying to budget sand through an hourglass. It's like it's a constantly moving thing. So again, as a independent prop master, I've done small budget shows. I've done shows with no money. I look at the script and I go back to you, Ken, if you're directing, or you, Anthony, if you're producing, and I say, okay, I think I can do this for $5,000, but you get no choices. So we have to make the one choice. I did this about 12 years ago on a little indie film where they kept asking me to do it and I kept saying no. And finally they said, well, can you come and have a meeting with the director? And I did. And, it was like, I'm not precious to my rate. If I like the script, I will go help if I have time and it makes sense. So I sat down with the director and I said, well, I read the script. It's very good. You have no money. I said, I can do it, but you only get one choice of anything and you can't change your mind on the day. And that one choice will be good, but you're only getting one choice. But I showed him that one choice ahead of time, always. I have a 24-hour rule. And I think any indie filmmaker, all of us, you have to show the director something before you get to the set. Showing something for approval while the camera's pointing at it, while the crew's standing there, is the worst place to do that. 24-hour. I have a 24-hour rule, even on Percy Jackson or Lemony Snicket's or anything where I was building stuff up to the last minute. I always had, it has to be ready 24 hours before. I have to show it to the director. I can't go on the day of and go, here's your prop, unless I'm playing director's roulette. And that's another story. To your young filmmakers, because I'm certainly past that age, you sit down with your script, like the Duke of Ken, your young prop people that came out of CAP, you, and then your production designer, Cheryl, and the various people. They knew their budget. They knew what they had to do. And they created an incredible looking film for not a lot of money in the art department because you were very specific as a director as to what you wanted and you had it completely focused in. And that's all we can ask for in the art department and props is that if you're going to take something on as a director and you're leading a group of people to your vision, then be very strong in that vision. Because if you're strong in that vision, it empowers us to get you the right thing early. And a lot of times you don't have to spend money, like the Stickman guys who went up to that house in Kelowna and had a creepy basement and they all slept in the house. I've done that. We've all been to the creepy location, or we've been. I finished a movie where I had 3,000 background, a $40 million movie in 1989. At the time, it was a lot of money. The next phone call I got was from a buddy of mine going, hey, I'm directing a video for a new band that are trying to make a break. And I went, great. I said, what do you need? He said, I need you to come and art direct, but you won't be paid. And I went, that's fine. It was tragically hit New Orleans is sinking. One of the best memories I've ever had of making anything. Wow. And I never got paid. And I didn't care about getting paid because I just wanted to do it. And that's really the crux of it all, is that You're either in this for the craft and your heart, because I always tell young students, if you're only coming in this industry for money, then, oh, please save yourself. Go get a job somewhere, because this is a terrible way to make a living if
Yeah.
you don't love it.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
way easier ways to make money for the amount of work that goes into making a film and being a part of it. You really do have to love it.
I loved what you just said though about the idea of the 24-hour rule and the prep time, because that feels to me like, I mean, it costs nothing to show someone a photograph of an idea, right? Or
Absolutely.
I found this on eBay. Does this work for you? Or something like that.
Absolutely.
It costs zero. I mean, it costs you your time. It costs the time and the labor to do that, but the cost of purchasing is zero. And the
Yeah.
decision once made, I mean, you don't have to have five options if everybody sat there and said, yeah, that's exactly what's going to work for this scene. It's just a matter then of taking that time and have. I've worked with so many directors who don't want to take the time to have these discussions early, because they just kind of think that they'll be inspired in the moment, or not, maybe not even in the moment, but they'll be inspired as they get closer, and they'll sort of figure it out as they get closer.
I was on a show that the director, it was a massive, massive show. The director only gave me 20 minutes in the entire prep. He was always busy. Oh, I got to go here. I got to go there. We shot for 30 days. The studio looked at the footage. We spent $40 million and shut it down. It never got made.
Oh,
So we
wow.
prepped for 8 weeks. We shot for 7 weeks. Studio came in and went, we can't save this. They just shut it down. $40 million later, because the director would never meet with any of the departments. And we got on set and it just became a wreck.
There you go.
Yeah, that's remarkable. That reminds me, Dean, of about 11 years ago, we did two pilots together back to back. And yeah, oof is
I better
right.
have a
And
drink of water on that one.
yeah. And so we did these two medical pilots back to back, and while the first one was the first one was shooting, the other one was prepping. And if no one's ever worked on a pilot before, I think that the making a pilot is like the worst form of production possible, because it's not an established show, so everybody's trying to figure out what the hell this thing actually is. The script is in flux, the budget's constantly changing, and when you approach a director, especially in your position, Dean, or production designer, or wardrobe, it's kind of like, is this thing green or is it red? And the director's like, I need it to be purple. And then you present a purple one, and the director's going, no, I said it was green. And that's what it's like working on a pilot. And it's just chaotic. And so doing two pilots back to back, we ended up forming Pilots Anonymous with another friend of ours, where we swore to never do a pilot again. But we've all fallen off the wagon, and had done
I
pilots
only
since
fell
then.
off once. I have to admit, I only fell off once. You guys, well, sorry. I mean,
I've done a few more, and
yeah.
it never gets better.
At the end of the day, in a gig economy, economics tell us we have to go to work. Sometimes we end up on things we don't want to do.
Yeah.
And in the case of the two pilots, we were both working with a great producer. We won't say her name, but and she always tried to take care of her crew. And we just finished a really difficult season of a show, and she said, "Oh, I've got a pilot." And then when we started the pilot, she goes, "I have another pilot." And all of us went, "We don't want to do that." And she goes, "I'm sorry, I kind of got us into it." And long story short, was one pilot was actually okay because it was prepped. The second pilot was just a train wreck. It was the thing that made us go, we're not doing this again. And I went off to do a pilot a year later because I did forget. And I remember I'm standing in White Rock at 4 a.m, and the pilot never got picked up. So I can say it's about good looking teenagers running through the woods on all fours, eating homeless people. I don't really need to say any more about what that is, other than the first AD called me on the radio. It's 4 a.m. I'm tired. It's really stupid. And I walk over, and first AD standing there with the key grip and the gaffer, and he's got his phone out and he's scrolling, and he goes, "You did Unforgiven, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You did Jesse James?" "Yeah." "Open Range." He's kind of reading my credits, and he goes, "Yeah, we were just talking amongst ourselves. How'd you end up here?" And I have to say in that moment, I thought it was funny. But when I was driving home, I thought, oh my God, like, what have I just done? What am I doing to myself? So it actually snapped me out of, I decided that I would start applying for really good projects again. And shortly after, I ended up on that mini series that went down. And then I ended up on Lemony Snicket's with Barry Sonnenfeld for 3 seasons. And the rest is history. Really, my trajectory has gone back up again since standing in the woods watching good-looking teenagers trying to eat homeless people.
Well, that's a great way into, what you ended up doing last year, which was Heretic and The Order. So, Heretic, well, both films are fantastic. One's a horror film, one's an very much like a 90s style thriller. Just, I loved both movies, but Heretic specifically, the scene with, the Monopoly games and the Bibles and putting all of that together. What was it like working on Heretic with Beck and Woods and making this movie?
Well, I had a history of not doing horror films, in all honesty. I was like, because it's always nights and rain in the woods. And I was like, you know what, I'm a little bit old for nights and rain in the woods. But when they called me for Heretic, I was very lucky because the SAG strike was going on, but A24 had an exemption. And so when they called, it was a very small budget and very short time. And they sent me the script and I read it and I thought, this is very interesting. It was really a psychological horror. The story, the arc of the story was very interesting. And so again, we didn't have a lot of money. It was a very small budget, but to sit down in prep with Beck Woods, they really were focused. They knew exactly what they wanted. They were really sweet guys. And at first I was thinking, how does this two director thing work? And I was really trying to figure that out because I'd never worked on a set with two directors. And they both really complement each other. I think that Brian Woods is more actor driven, and Scott Beck is more technical. But yet they both would talk to Hugh, and they just had a really good rapport. And they were really dialed in on the props. And so you both, as writers, know that a big scene, our script supervisor, I'll just tell you about the crew quickly. We had, because it was very slow, we were the only show filming, we had Chris Nolan's dolly grip. We had Danny Villeneuve's script supervisor. We had the Tron lighting crew. We had the Tron grip crew. So it was kind of like all these featured people came to this little set, this little house in Maple Ridge that we built on stage. So the script supervisor and I were talking, and we were talking about that scene in specific with the Monopoly games and everything. She said, Dean, a big scene has usually around 75 lines of dialogue. That's a big scene in a movie. She said, this scene has 401. And he had, I can't remember the count, but I figured he's interacting with at least 10 to 15 props through the course of this scene.
Yeah.
And so with the Monopoly games, the Bibles, the Holly's record, all the, not giving away any sort of spoiler alerts here, but he had to interact with all these props as he's saying this endless dialogue to Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, who are both phenomenal young actors as well. They held their own with Hugh Grant. They never missed a line. They all came to set prepared, pleasant, and nice to work with. But just to work all those props and the producer at the end of the film, because whenever Hugh, we halfway through, if a candle didn't light or if the board game didn't quite open the way he wanted, he would just say, Dean. And I would have to walk in and reset the prop while the camera was still rolling. And the producer said, we could just have a gag reel of Hugh saying your name. And it wasn't in a malicious way. He just was used to me stepping in and fixing things. And so Bibles were easy to clear because basically they're public domain. You just had to make sure that the covers there wasn't any illustrations on them. The Monopoly games, they actually didn't ask for permission, I believe. I believe that they thought there was some sort of rule where it could be on the screen for less than this amount of time and it would be fine to use. So they were always cutting around, showing it too much. And the Landlord's game, we couldn't find one. There really wasn't. There might be two in the world that exist anymore. And I found one in Chicago in a museum, and I just had them photograph it and take all the measurements. And we rebuilt the board here in Vancouver. The art department did all the graphics. We sent it out to a company to have it built. But we did all this in 3 weeks. Same with the house model that we had to build in the movie.
3 weeks. Wow.
3 weeks prep.
3 weeks.
And not a big budget. And Hugh, for instance, the signature glasses in the show, that's the thing when you're writing a script as a young filmmaker. If you decide that you're going to put glasses on your actor and their feature thing, just know that you're probably going to spend $3,000. You might as well just say $3,000 because you got to have AR coded. You have to have doubles. If there's stunts, you have to have triples. You sometimes, if the actor wears prescription, then you have to have a pair that don't have a prescription for the stand-in. It just goes on and on. So with Hugh, because we weren't getting Hugh till 2 days before camera, the costume designer phoned me from Los Angeles and said, I'm going to England to meet Hugh for a fitting. Do you want me to take some glasses? So I phoned my place in LA that I deal with for vintage glasses. And I said, can you put some trays together? They have a long history with me, so it was easy. I said, can you put some trays together? And the costume designer will take them to London for Hugh to try on. So when she got to London, Hugh narrowed it down to 3 pairs. But he said, I'll decide on the day that we film. So I had to take the 3 pairs and double them and put lenses in them with my meager budget. I spent probably $2,000 for something that wasn't going to be on camera, but I had to do it because I had no time before we narrowed down. And then I had to get more pairs of the glasses they chose. And so there was just a lot of process, but the prep period with Beck Woods was very good. Phil Messina, the designer, like I said, thing about Vancouver is if that show showed up at a busy time, they would never get that crew because it was a very low budget film. And that crew are all like world class. And, but we enjoyed ourselves so much on that set. Everybody had fun. Everybody loved every minute on that set. We all love working with each other because we don't get to see each other that much anymore because everybody's traveling on all these big features. So it was really a fun, and we all realized how much we love making small movies.
What made this one so much fun then? Like, what do you think was the reason?
Well, it all starts at the top. Beck Woods, as directors, they're film fans. They built a rep theater in their hometown of Davenport, Iowa. They love movies. So in between setups and stuff, we would talk classic movies, and they engaged with the crew on their love of movies. And the crew were all veterans of their crafts that have started on small movies back in the beginning and have made their way through the Blade Runners and the Inceptions and various films to suddenly reconvene in Vancouver on this very small set of this very small budgeted movie. And the other thing is the performances were so good between the 3 actors, Hugh Grant and Sophie and Chloe. I can't say enough. And the thing is, when you're in a heavy subject matter, sometimes the entire set will keep that whole heavy matter all day, which can really be draining. But when cut was said, even though it was a quiet set and we didn't want to break the actors' concentration, there was a lightness about it.
Yeah, that's so great. And I'm assuming it's pretty, even though you had these amazing legendary crew members, there weren't that many of them. It was quite a small crew overall, correct?
Yeah, very small crew. There was just 3 of us in props. And the first week in the house, both of my assistants got sick. And so I was by myself. And the on-set dresser became my assistant, and I became his assistant. And it was funny. At one moment, I was going to call somebody in the arena, and I had nobody to call. So, but it was fun because I actually did a mini series by myself once back in the late 80s. I did a mini series that took place from 1945 to 1967, and I would work the set, and then I would go shop at night for perishable because this main set was a restaurant. So I was making the food during the day and stuff. But I just had fun. It was just fun. The order was very similar to Heretic in size. And we were working with an Australian director, Justin Kurzel, who directed a fantastic film called Nitram that when I watched it, I went, I have to work with this guy because I get sent the script by a friend of mine. She said, who would you recommend to do props on it? And I read the script and I said, me. And because the thing is, we all know when we get a script that we love and you go, I have to work on this film. I'm the guy who turned down a $150 million movie to work on a $2 million movie because I like the script. And that really comes down to having a finished script, having a script ready to film. And then when you get to the set, if your script is settled, then you have a successful shoot. The Order had a finished script. It had because the Writers Guild strike was going on. So we had a finished script. They couldn't make any changes to the script. That script was done. And Justin Kurzel had a real vision for what he was doing with that movie. And he could go into every location. And he figured out all the shots ahead of time. And to do an action movie in 33 days, that's all location with no built sets. There were no built, everything was location. That entire movie is a location. And to make your day every day with all those set pieces and stunts and action was phenomenal. And the thing was, we never felt rushed or unsafe because we all came in, we knew what we were shooting, and the crew was really focused all the way through. And it really goes back to your script. And I'll say this about the script before we move into the next question. I worked on 4 feature films with white scripts when we started and white scripts when we finished. Unforgiven, Open Range, and Jesse James. Those scripts had one producer, David Valdez, and he believed in your prep is your movie, you rehearse, you do what you can to answer all your questions before you get to the set, and then you'll have a good set. When we did The Order, again, white script. And I have to tell you, amazing.
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
basically like all the kinks have been worked out before we even get to day one. Yeah, or even before you start prep, like the script has been developed to the point where
Yeah,
by the
they
time you
knew.
start hiring people, you've already figured out all the you've the logistics are already determined.
Yeah, by the time I get there, the logistics are usually determined because the production designer has been on location surveys with with the director. They picked out all their locations, and so when I get there, usually on a show, a lot of the locations are settled, and I can go into the director's office or in the art department, and I had the roadmap of the movie.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And that goes back to what we always talk about is just it comes down to the script. Your script has to be in the best shape possible before you start prep. It does not get better when you get to set, right? Even working it
Mhm.
out, you're only trying to save what's already there, right? Your script has to be in the best shape possible.
Yeah, especially if you're in the indie world, and really, even though Heretic was A24 and The Order was, I can't even remember what it was, had multiple producers. It was not it was a fragile finance movie. No money. We had no issues with money that way, but it was just you could tell that there was not a dime. Put it this way: Jude Law, Justin Kurzel, Nick Holt, all the act. Nobody had trailers. Nobody had assistants. Every dollar was on that screen, and they committed to every dollar being on that screen. So if you go to an independent film, or you're making your film with, you have 12 days to make it, have a
Mhm.
finished script. You know what you want, and you're going to get into a situation where the weather may turn on you, and you don't have days to play with. That you may have to put the weather as an element in your show. However you do it, you're
Mhm.
going to face the odd
Things
situation
will
where you're
come
going to
up
have to.
during production, absolutely.
Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
have to, and it happened to Justin as well. Everybody talked about The Order having this real mood to it, like, the oranges and all that, like it looks out of the 70s stuff. Yeah, it's because there were forest fires going on and the sky was brown.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't any magic filter. It was like we were kind of in a smoky haze at times on that movie. So yeah, sometimes nature works against you that way. What was supposed to be a big, beautiful sunny day is suddenly a hazy day, but it worked in the context of the film.
It's a beautiful looking film too.
That's where bloated budgets come from, even on the bigger productions too. Though you always hear the retrospective horror stories about the films that don't, like the big budget films that don't work out, and you hear about the fact that their script wasn't ready and they had to do a whole bunch of reshoots after the film was over just to kind of stitch and Frankenstein this whole thing together just to make the story somewhat coherent. That is evident in the viewing experience. No, I've rarely walked into a movie where there weren't script problems and gone, "Oh wow, they really figured out a way to make that work."
Yeah, it's if you're trying to fix it on the floor, it's going to show up on the screen no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because somebody asked me years ago in Vancouver, like, with your resume, how come you're not putting your name in for some of these big tentpole type films that were coming through at the time? And I went, I don't do those. I did second unit on one, and I helped another prop master out on another. But I felt like I was working for a small country, and I had about as much creative input as the janitor down the hall. So I just, if I can't go talk to the director and also offer a creative input and not feel afraid to offer that creative input, it's not that I want to come in and go, hey, I have a great idea. But if I'm standing there and I think that's interesting, you don't want to be like, who are you? I remember going to accounting on one of the big tentpole films. It was like going into the office in Brazil. It was all a bunch of cubicles. And every day I go in, they go, who are you? And I go, I'm Dean. I'm the second unit prop master. And they go, cubicle J. And I'd be like,
Oh,
thank you. I feel like I'm at H&R Block, but thank you.
how has technology affected the props industry, like since you first got started to now?
It's made, in some cases, made sets safer. I think that, for The Order, we had a lot of robbery scenes, and and the director said, we're going to do it old school. We're doing blanks, but we were a very fast moving company. And so what I mean by that is we were shooting very quickly, and there would be the odd time I would always be, yes, we can do it. No, we can't. As the director said to me, I've never been on a set where a decision about gunfire has been made so fast where you just go yes and no. And when I said no, I just said post-production muzzle flash. There was no tricks. We didn't have to deal with electric guns or anything like that. It was just like post-production muzzle flash. Stunts, same thing. You can do some pretty elaborate things now and keep everybody safe. As far as a hand prop goes, the reality is that for me, it's mostly the blade weapons. If I have any stabbing scenes and stuff, it used to be the old days, you'd have a retractable knife that had some spring mechanism, and it looked terrible. They always looked terrible. It was like, really, we're going to show this on camera, but I guess we don't have a choice. Now you just cut the blade off. They have a handle and they'll CGI it in. So I think that technology is great when it's used as a tool to help. But if technology takes over the story, then it's not good. And I know that my wife, her least favorite category, sorry, visual effects people, but if the film is too overpowered by visual effects, she just kind of looks at it. And I do too. I don't mind visual effects. I think I work on a show that's heavily visual effects, but it's usually set extensions. Percy Jackson, we do a lot of practical props. We a lot of our stuff is real. We don't. They look at me and go, "Can you do this real?" Because it just costs so much if we don't.
Yeah, when visual effects is used to enhance what's already there, it's fantastic, right? And like even Christopher Nolan brags about not having visual effects in his. He has tons of visual effects in his movie, but it's things that you would never even dream of being a visual effect. A split screen here, or just painting something out, or whatever. We do that all the time, and that just makes everything better. But when the whole thing is taken over by a CG whatever, that can make you feel a little removed from the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's a character driven industry. Like a character, your story is character driven, and that this is your money or whatever. I'm not much money, but this is your money, and the believable character. And so you just never want to lose track of the heart of your story by putting some whiz bangy thing through CGI or effect. You just want to make sure that you don't lose the heart of it.
Well, Dean, we have taken up so much of your time, and we really appreciate you joining us today. Before we wrap up, though, we have one last question for you, which is if you could just give one piece of advice for indie filmmakers out there, maybe somebody interested in props, getting into props, what would that be?
Make sure your script is ready. Don't rush into production if you're not comfortable that your script is 100% dialed in. Young prop people wanting to come into our industry, I often get asked a lot, how do I get into props? It's really tough right now in this film economy in Vancouver to break into the mainstream industry like IATSE, which is the union I belong to. But there are so many opportunities in the indie film world. And I can tell you, what you learn on an indie film set and a low budget film set, you will take with you to a $200 million set. All my skill and tenacity were learned on an indie set. I once decorated an electronics factory for a bottle of whiskey. I mean, you learn the fine art of talking to people and how to get them to allow you to use things. But I will say one cautionary tale. Don't bring your grandfather or grandmother's heirloom thing to the set to become a prop, because if you can't afford to have it break or get lost, never bring it to a set. But yeah, tenacity, love the craft. No matter what you do in this industry, you have to love it to live it. As it's an old cliche, but I've said it before. You have to love it to live it. And for 39 years, I've loved every day. Well, most days, not those pilots, Ken. Hated those pilots. But other than that, I love most days.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dean. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
it was really wonderful to meet you, Dean. Thanks again.
Yeah, good luck with the podcast. I've been really enjoying it on my drives back and forth to my home. It's a nice hour on the road.
All right, so that was an incredible chat with Dean. He has so much knowledge and information, and he has seen and done it all, and just the nicest guy on the planet on top of that, and just like so soft-spoken, so humble. It's like, Dean, come on, you've worked on these amazing projects with amazing people. Tell us all about it. But he's so humble and yeah, just the kindest man. So what were some of your takeaways from that conversation, Anthony?
Well, just picking up on Dean as the kind of that kind of a person on a film set. I was thinking about it while we were talking with Dean. I was like, if I saw Dean on my film set, first of all, I would think, okay, well, we got something good going on here, because it just seems like the aura he's going to bring is a level of professionalism and dedication to his craft that lets me know that we're good. Like we don't have to worry about anything. What I really liked was his approach to props is one that he takes his job very seriously, but he's always in service of story. Like he's not there to make it about himself and what his and who he is as a person. He's there to make sure that it's about the story. He's there to make sure that everybody gets what they need out of it. The director gets what they need, and it's almost a way of how he sets his standard for how he wants to work with the director. Like he sort of has this sort of list of criteria of whether or not a production is worth his time, no matter the budget level. Like the budget doesn't matter to him at this point. Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a promise for him, but it's not like I expect him to work for a whiskey bottle or something like that. But you get the sense that he'd work on any budget level film if it was if he wanted to work with the people and he wanted to work with the story that was there for him. So I love professionals who are just excellent at what they do, and Dean just comes across and exudes in how he presents himself.
Yeah, it's true. He still loves doing what he does and he loves telling stories. And that's what we do, right? That's why we got into this, is we're storytellers, and we found a way to get into the industry, have a job, and tell these stories. And like, it's what we do day in and day out, right? When we're talking to people, I love just telling stories and being a part of that in some way. Where sometimes you see that some people are just in it for the money. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, there are way better jobs out there. If you're going to work 80 hours a week, for this salary, no, you can go and make money a whole other way, and it's not going to kill you, because like film is physically demanding. You have to love wanting to do this, and Dean is one of those people that just loves what he does. And he's worked again with like so many amazing directors and up and coming directors. He was an advisor on my latest short film, The Doukhobor, and he took these two young prop masters under his wing and helped them along on our film. And it was just a blast getting to work with him recently. And then I'd work with him professionally, about 10 years ago, seeing his work ethic and how seriously he took everything from, we were on Falling Skies, which was an alien invasion show. And it was just, it didn't matter if it was that or Unforgiven or Assassination of Jesse James. Like, he takes the work seriously and he delivers every single time. And every director that I've ever worked with around Dean is just, they've come up to me and they're just like, who is this guy? He's amazing. And I was like, yeah, that's Dean Goodine. He's one of the best in the country.
Well, what's interesting too is, I've never really thought of props other than as props. The way Dean presented is, he says, he's there to teach the actors also how to do how to do whatever it is that their character is supposed to be able to do. So, and you never really think about that. You're like, okay, so if they're in a Western, well, they have to know how to handle a gun, and they have to know, not just know how to handle a gun, but they have to know how to quick draw, or how to do whatever it is that that they need to technically be able to do in order to look like they're experts at the craft. I never really thought of props in that way. It's like, I always thought of it as, it's, if the actor touches it, it's a prop. It's not just that the actor touches it, it's a prop. If the actor uses it, it's a prop, and it's the props master's job to make sure the actor knows how to use that, whatever it is that they're picking up.
Yeah, like we worked on a medical drama together where, the actor was performing heart surgery. So it was Dean's responsibility to get the actor into training with the surgeon tech so that they knew how to move their hands correctly to make the surgery look real. Dean is actually involved in all of that too. So whether it's weapons training, from a flamethrower to a machine gun to a pistol, or to surgery, open heart surgery, or just a simple suture, like all of this is part of the props department and training these actors on how to do it properly. Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. We'll see you next week. See you, Anthony.
You can.